So Albania has been in the headlines, not just locally, but around the world recently, mainly to do with the opening of a new NATO military base in Kočova. I'm joined in the studio today by Artem Mekolari, retired captain, former commandant in charge of the Albanian Navy, PhD and teaching at Alexander Moisu University in Durrës. It is an honor. Welcome to Inside Albania.
Thank you for your invitation.
Now, let's dive straight in. So as I mentioned, Albania has taken some bold steps recently. The old airbase that used to be in Stalin City. Now, I love this story, you know, that during the time of communism, it was named Stalin City when Albania was close to the Soviet Union. Now it's named Kočova, which is, you know, slightly more neutral. But Albania with NATO, NATO funds have turned this base. They've reconstructed it, rehabilitated it, and it's going to be used by NATO as a base in the region, which is great. Now, Albania has also offered up Porto Romano as a port to NATO. From what I understand, this hasn't been decided on yet. This is huge for a relatively small country in the Western Balkans. To me, this is a huge thing to have two potential NATO bases in one country. Now, I want to ask you, how did we get here from 2009, when Albania joined NATO, to having potentially two NATO bases?
This is due to the commitment of Albania as a member of NATO and prior member of NATO. So Albania has participated in almost all the NATO operations abroad. And also, before joining the NATO, we have been part of the operation. We have been part of operation in Afghanistan, in Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq, and many other countries. So the contribution of Albania in NATO is huge, not in the last 15 years, but starting from 1994, when Albania asked to be a partnership for peace member and was accepted. So when we talk about the Kočova air base, this is, let's say, working together with NATO is a contribution, and is the second most important day for Albania in the NATO membership. After the membership in 2009, this is the second one. But there is more, because this naval base, this air base, is, as we said, is available to NATO, because it will be under the Albania Air Force Command. But NATO has invested in the infrastructure, making this base available for their, let's say, air units. Why they need to invest? Because Albania doesn't have aircraft. So we have to make it available based on the NATO standards, available for the NATO aircrafts. So they invest in the security issues, they invest in command and control, communication, and other infrastructures which make that available based on NATO standard. It will be a NATO tactical base, which means that it will be used based on the operational requirement. It's not 350 days used by NATO. We will maintain it, we will keep it operational, and it will be used for NATO operational purpose, especially in the Western Balkans.
And will it be used, I mean, just forgive me because I am not a military person, so I don't know all the correct terms, but will it be used when there are operations as a base, or will it be used to repair aircraft or to refuel, restock?
We call it forward operational base, which means it doesn't have the full options as a home base has.
Okay.
So it doesn't have the repair capacities. It doesn't have the facilitation for the crews and their families. It has the possibility or the options for logistic purpose to accommodate, to logistic support, ammunition support, everything which is necessary for a short time operational requirement. And we are talking for hosting up to 6 aircrafts, fighters, and 2 logistic one. So that's the maximum strength that the Kuchova Air Base will offer.
So it's to be used short term, planes coming and going. And
In this way, having a forward operational base, the NATO is capable to fulfill some requirements, tactical requirements like flexibility that the airplanes must have, which in fact fulfill another requirement, air superiority and the possibility of targeting targets in the ground in the case of operation. So that's the mission of the base.
And what do we know about Porto Romano? What I last saw was that the proposal was being sort of considered by NATO, and I haven't heard much since.
In fact, so far there are only two statements by NATO. One was in 2011, when the Supreme Commander today, who was in another assignment, stated that the Durrës historical port has a strategic approach to NATO, to alliance, which means that he totally excluded in NATO operational terms the usage of Porto Romano. And few days ago, the Albanian telegraphic agency has a communication with NATO with the shape, and finally they stated in the answer, in the reply, that we accept any offer from our allies, but for the moment we are very engaged with increasing the ammunition capacities to Ukraine. So which means that in a certain way, I see that Porto Romano is not the vision of NATO. There are also some other facts which in fact make this impossible, because still is in the evaluation the Pasha Liman naval base from the NATO. Albania in October 2019 asked NATO to see the possibility of Pasha Liman naval base as a NATO base. And 3 months later, NATO, the SHAPE headquarters, replied, we accept the offer and we will evaluate Pasha Liman naval base as a NATO logistic base. And still NATO, with its military structure, is evaluating Pasha Liman naval base, while our prime minister shift the view or the proposal to Porto Romano. But Porto Romano has some other problems because it doesn't have a feasibility study, has, let's say, problems with a MSA membership action plan with EU, and doesn't fulfill some technical requirements from NATO, which means to have a full capacity of the landing forces. So in terms of military operation, if the crisis erupt in the east, and NATO have the full deployment of forces, only Durrës port and the Bay of Durrës gave that possibility for a full landing operation, while Porto Romano doesn't have that possibility.
I mean, the traffic's terrible around there. Imagine several thousand troops arriving and getting stuck on the NASA.
So if you remember 2 years ago, we have an exercise defending Europe, and the landing operation of the NATO forces was not done only in Durrës port, but also in Durrës Bay, because Durrës Bay is shallow, is flat, and you can have a full amphibious operation.
But there was, I've been talking to friends about this, about having an airbase here. And when we look at the current geopolitical context, the war in Ukraine, we have Serbia and Russia who are quite sort of close, and there is instability in the Western Balkans. Is Albania not making itself, I don't want to use the word target, but sort of putting its head above the precipice slightly by having a NATO base here? If things are to escalate, does it increase any risk to Albania?
I don't believe so. The Albania was chosen for the reasons that I gave, that I talked earlier before, but also for another strong reason. Albania is the only country with, let's say, with few or almost no influence from Russian or Russian satellites in Western Balkan.
Yes.
So which means Albania is, let's say, a full NATO allied country, even in the outside influence from the Russia.
It's even the people are the most pro-EU
Yes.
out of the Western Balkans.
The
as well.
history has driven Albania in that alliance, and in the meantime, but when we talk about being a target, all NATO countries are target. But close you are to the Russian borders, close a higher target you are. So which means that Albania is far from Russian borders first, and the second one, being a NATO member, being in that alliance with Ukraine, and also with in our region where is a lot of instability and a lot of risk for a new, I'm not saying conflict, but instability, internal instability. Having a NATO base in Albania is a commitment, is a guarantee for Albanian security and regional security.
Yes, this is the thing. I should have checked before I came on air, but like the 2% GDP spending, I don't think Albania meets it.
This year will meet the requirement.
We will?
Yes.
Great. But this airbase, it is another sort of thing to say, Hiwa, protect us, please. We're...
This is, it is in Albania, but in fact, it will be used for regional purpose.
Yes.
So that's the...
Now, I've heard several rumors, and I want to address it because people have been asking about it. There were rumors going around that the base would be used to train Ukrainian troops. Now, this was probably Chinese whispers in the media, but I don't think this is something that's going to happen.
So far, is no any statements from Albania or NATO regarding that initiative to train the Ukraine pilots. But even if it happens, is part of our engagement.
Yes.
So it's not something that we put ourselves in risk. We are at risk as NATO, as every NATO member. So this is something. Albania, I support the idea that Albania have to do everything to support Ukraine. We are a small country with a small budget, but we have the possibility to help Ukraine and to be engaged with NATO with our infrastructure.
Yes.
So that's the way how we must work to move forward, to cooperate and to be engaged and to cooperate with NATO and our allies in order to increase our contribution.
Yeah, we can't pledge billions of euros in aid or ammunition or anything. So there are other ways that we do this, which brings me on to the next question. Prime Minister Edi Rama told me in an interview just before the Ukraine summit in Tirana that it's time for the Western Balkans to play a bigger role in Europe's security. That Europe, the EU, needs us as maybe more than we need them. We play a crucial role in ensuring their security and European values. Do you believe that this is correct? And is this NATO base a part of this?
We have to divide it, to split it into two parts, as a geopolitical actor and as a value. When we talk for geopolitical values that we have to add to the NATO and the Western countries, sure, our region is important in geopolitical terms because it's part of Adriatic Sea, which in fact, in a possible conflict, will be a lake for NATO due to the Otranto Channel.
Yes.
So, and the second one, the route from Durrës or from Albania to the Black Sea is a strategic and security route for NATO and EU. So this is, let's say, a geopolitical position. When we talk about values, our values, best values, must be a contribution to NATO, but we have to improve our values based on the EU values, which are related to the government, to the elections, to the freedom of the people, etc. So we need some or business climate,
Yes.
etc. So must be, let's say, a communication and the additional value, but we have also to improve our values.
Now, also at the Ukraine summit, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, he asked Western Balkan countries to produce ammunition for Ukraine. As far as I'm aware, Serbia is the biggest producer of ammunition in the region. Whether they have already sent ammunition to Ukraine or not, this has been reported in the press and denied, and there's been backwards and forwards. So aside from Serbia, do any other countries in the region have this capacity or the potential to have capacity to do this?
Bosnia has capacities producing ammunition. And the request of President Zelensky was a very clear and request, because today Ukraine is facing a lack of ammunition, not only for Western calibers like 105 and 155, but also for the Eastern calibers that they are using. Albania Prime Minister, in fact, support the idea of helping Ukraine. We don't have for the moment activity or business in producing not only ammunition, but defense business. We don't have a defense business in Albania. We used to have in the past, but we must help Ukraine. The war of Ukraine is our war. They are protecting our values, and they are protecting our integrity, and mostly most of the Western countries understand that. So Albania also must do the best. There are several ways to do that. First, to increase or to start the ammunition business in Albania. But it will need time. The second one is Albania can be an ammunition hub. There are many countries who have ammunition, but they have political restraints to send ammunition to Ukraine. So Albania can be an ammunition hub for Ukraine. So there are ways that, but
this has happened in Europe already, I think, with, I can't remember exactly, there were some countries that were neutral and therefore cannot give ammunition directly, but they were sending it to another country, which was
so Albania can do that, to be an ammunition hub for Ukraine. There are several countries in the East, NATO countries, who, due to some political implication, cannot send directly, like Poland, for example, Romania, Bulgaria, even Yugoslavia, Serbia. I'm sorry, even Serbia cannot send. So we can be used as ammunition hub, and we can help Ukraine until we will build our capacities.
In terms of Albania building its own capacities, I mean, how is it feasible to envisage a defense sector in Albania, producing various military equipment, be it ammunition or other forms of defense equipment? Is it feasible, or is it something that needs a decade, 2 decades to be established?
And nowadays, to build a defense business, it's not so difficult, because you may have a foreign partner. And you may invest in that sector, a joint venture. But the point is why we need to invest. First, we need to invest for Ukraine. And what we'll see in the horizon, we see a common threat in the future. As you see, the defense budget of the many countries are increased. Military capacities are increased in weapon, let's say. So which means that even Albania has started slowly to increase the capacities. There will be a time when the capacity will be increased faster. So even for our needs or our neighbors who has no capacity, like Montenegro or Northern Macedonia, so we can have, or Kosovo, we can have, let's say, our business, and we can share this business also with our NATO members or Kosovo.
And just a quick question for listeners who are foreign. What is the capacity of the Albanian armed forces in terms of the Navy, the Air Force and land forces?
Today, the maximum strength is 8,500. And from 8,500, military strength is the total authorized is 6,500. So the biggest part of that, it belongs to the Army. And Navy and Air Force has, let's say, Navy is about 800 plus and Air Force 600 plus. And but we have some other small organization under MOD or General Staff, which in fact are filled with the joint personnel.
Now, I have a question. I work for media in Brussels as well, and I'm seeing lots of countries in Europe are starting to look at mandatory conscription, like mandatory military service of some form, be it you have to do it, or there's a Nordic model where people fill out a questionnaire and ones who are quite likely to be suited for military jobs are then given an offer, basically. Do you think Albania would ever consider something like this? Do you agree with the sort of mandatory service for youth?
In general, I agree not exactly with the terms that we used to have in the past, mandatory service, because the requirements from our forces today is 500 to 600 new recruiters every year. And the number of people who are graduated by the high school is only in Albania. I'm not talking abroad, which is 50% of the total number, is about 17,000. So the number in general, so the requirements are very little compared to the numbers, availability of the numbers that we have. But we need to have a kind of engagements of the people who are graduated from the high school or who have a certain age to be educated with the military culture.
Yes, even a summer school, a mandatory 6-week program.
6-week program.
If you need volunteers, my daughter is ready.
You can call it mandatory service, but it will be a kind of military education as a mandatory, and also it increases some strength in the country, like a military or the coming, let's say, you give the idea, we are not going to live as we lived until now. We will have a possibility, let's say the threat is different. They have a different kind of education and discipline. So they are more engaged in the problems in the country or the risk and the threats the country is facing, which makes them more, let's say, cautious of the future.
I think it would be good for all students once they graduate to have, be it 6 weeks, a month, whatever, some, I'm going to sound like my mother here, to teach them some discipline, some life skills, some survival skills.
Many countries have that, let's say, schools, or let's say, you call it schools. Some countries call it mandatory service, but is not part, let's say, the strength of the people of this contingent is not as a strength of the armed forces. This is just a clear future education.
Yes.
Is not part of the military service.
But then maybe from those people, some of them will want to join.
Sure,
and
they have a kind of education.
Yes.
They have a better idea about military, and it increases also the perception about military.
Yes.